Welcome to our Leading Through Crisis, the Coronavirus conversation. I'm excited to be here with my partner, John Picarello. My name's Chad Reyes, and today we're going to be talking about something that is very prevalent going on in society today. We obviously, every business, regardless of the type of business, is being impacted by what is occurring right now in the United States and globally with the coronavirus. Today, we're going to be having a conversation and a discussion around how to lead through a crisis. Um, I would think you would agree that we're in a crisis in this nation, and John and I are going to have a conversation. We're going to talk through some of it, and we're hoping that you're impacted by it. Some of the stuff we're going to share, we hope they'll be able to help you lead as you lead through this crisis. So, in getting started, the first thing that we're talking about and we're saying to business leaders is that we have to be careful of how we manage our thought life because thoughts turn into beliefs, beliefs turn into behaviors, and behaviors turns into results. And my partner John talks a lot about this. He writes a lot about this in our newsletters. John, what are your thoughts around this? What would you say to the people right now that are going through a lot of crisis right now? Like almost everyone is. Everyone's lifestyle has been changed and life has been impacted around this thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, results.
And everybody has a thought and opinion of how the coronavirus has impacted them. It's impacted us economically as a nation. So we're just one big family, 350 million people, one big family, because no one has been unaffected by it. In the aspect of thoughts, everything begins with a thought. Your values begins with a thought. Our actions begin with the thought. All our beliefs, as we have here, it begins with a thought. So watching over our thoughts, we may not realize it at first, but you get a thought and you may not think much of it. But as you entertain the thought, then the creative aspect of how we think begins to flow, and we will automatically begin to build out those thoughts. And those thoughts, if we really think through them enough, they begin to grip your heart. So, and that's where beliefs are formed. So subconsciously, you don't realize it, that the forming of those thoughts begin to form a value. And those are beliefs that are going to guide you. Everyone knows that they're led by their values. So unconscious values or conscious values, that's how we're led. So all our behaviors, whether you do things instinctively without thinking through it right away, or you're planning it, both are guided by values. And so your values do morph into behaviors, and everyone knows consistent behaviors bring certain results. And those results began with the thought.
Yeah. And as I think through these thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, results, I think as we're going through this crisis globally, it's important for us to really manage our thought life. I think now more than ever, it's important for us to be reading stuff that really gets our mind in a right state of mind because the truth is that it's very easy to be consumed by doubt, very easy to
Yes.
be consumed by fear, and if we do that, scientifically it's proven that we lower our chances of winning, of getting out of this more effectively. So today, John and I are going to talk about three specific areas that we've recognized and have gone through to help lead through a crisis. And the first one is emotional and psychological perspective. And this is an interesting part that when we talk about the beliefs, the thoughts turn into beliefs, turn into behaviors, turns into results. It's important to also understand that every person we come in contact with is going to have some form of a emotional and psychological perspective of what's going on right now in society around the coronavirus. And one of the ways to lead through this crisis is to recognize that each person is at a different space. Each person is in a different mindset. And not to assume that every single person is doing terrible because that's not the case. Some people are struggling through it, but everyone's not doing terrible. And quite honestly, everyone's not doing great. but understanding the emotional and psychological perspective is one area that will help us and help you grow through this crisis. The next area is effective leadership, and we're going to be talking about all three of these areas today. But effective leadership allows you to lead more effectively. Anyone who knows me personally knows that I say this quite frequently. I say that I want the highest probability of winning. Well, what I know right now is that through a crisis, effective, high level leadership, someone who's leading well will get through the crisis better than someone who's not leading well.
Exactly.
So I would just encourage you that we want to make sure that we're having a positive emotional and psychological perspective. Two, we want to make sure that we're leading well, effective leadership. And then the last is we want business strategy. We want to make sure that we're being sound in our business strategy. We're being sound in the decisions we're making. So we're gonna look through all three of these areas as we discuss on our discussion today around leading through crisis, the coronavirus. Which leads us to that first part, the emotional and psychological perspective. And I think my partner John has a really powerful story that can kind of really hit home and share a personal, real life story that really impacted his life. So, John, why don't you share what happened on September 11th to you and why you're able to really help others lead through a crisis because you've gone through a tremendous crisis yourself.
Yeah. Understanding the perspectives, and if you think about the thermometer, and before I get into the story, there's three levels we all function at one time or another. And, the first is the positive. And we all want to stay in a positive frame of mind. And that's where, in time of crisis, you have the brief increases of heart rate and mild elevations in stress, hormone levels. And all of us, that's where you want to be when the stress level is high or during times of crisis.
And I want to share to that because when we're looking at that positive aspect when it comes to stress, this is the stress that helps us perform higher,
That's right.
better, right? So as an example, this is when all of a sudden a great opportunity comes up and you got to put your game face on. You got to
Yes.
get ready to battle and win this
Yeah.
opportunity. That's a level of stress, but that's a positive stress.
That's right.
But there's other stresses, and I know you're going to talk about that. There's other stresses that if we don't manage it well, it creates turmoil and craziness.
Yeah, just internal turmoil for real. But the positive aspect of stress, everybody knows stress is not a bad thing. And we'll talk more about this later, but stress is not a problem. It's how we respond to it. So when it comes to stress, just keep in mind that the positive side of stress means that all your senses are heightened and you're in more of an alert mode. So that's positive. And for business, that's excellent. And then there comes elevated stress where it becomes a little more tolerable. But it's not where you want to be, and that's where serious or temporary stress responses, buffered by supportive relationships, can help make it tolerable. But you don't want to stay there because if you stay there long enough, it becomes toxic, and that's prolonged activation of stress response systems in the absence of protective relationships. And this is why, as Chad said earlier, we're in this together. And the whole nation is in this together, communities are in this together, our families. So there's no lone rangers here.
And John, I think as people, as business leaders are going through this, it is really important for them to understand how important it is to discuss what's going on in their business, discuss what's going on in their emotions, because the last thing you want to do is keep that all bottled up. And as a leader, I know that it's important for a leader to take the role of leading the company, leading the family,
Yes.
leading the business. But we also have to be aware that we're human and that we do have limitations. And one of the things that we spoke about earlier in the Lions Club Mastermind that we were doing was how important it is to recognize that we need a community of people to share with.
That's
We
right.
need to be able to take stuff off of our chest so that we don't carry all that burden and we're able to talk through it. Could you one share how you did that in your life, and second is your story is tremendous for what's going on right now in this world that we're living in.
Well, when it comes to stress levels, and especially now with the coronavirus, it's traumatic.
Hmm.
And so this is where you get that commonly known phrase now, where you get this post-trauma stress.
Mm.
And as you go through it, we don't realize how we're wired. We're so complex. But when you are working or you're doing something, whatever it is, during an event, and it could be a disaster, or it could be something like this, a pandemic, any kind of thing that is out of the norm. And when you go through something like this, it's a negative impact. What happens is we are impacted first, believe it or not, subconsciously. And what's happening is our subconscious is grabbing things. Scientifically, we know that consciously we process around 40 bits of information per second. But internally, unconsciously, the processing of bits of information could be as high as 20 million bits of information per second. And that's subconsciously. So in times of stress, a lot of times we are internalizing it, but we're unconscious of it. You don't even realize you've been impacted. And you might realize later on that I'm not feeling too well, or I'm not feeling right, or I'm feeling stressed. And unknowingly, you've been impacted. And you have to talk to somebody, because the way this works is what's called debriefing, where military personnel come back if they saw combat. Then there's a debriefing. Astronauts, when they come back from outer space, there's a debriefing. And what it is causing us to talk out what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and how we're processing it. Because unconsciously, if we are meeting something that's traumatic or something beyond the norm, the subconscious, which is always monitoring what is normal, would take that which is abnormal, off the charts, this would be a traumatic experience, and dump it immediately into short-term memory. And that's a defense mechanism so we can keep functioning consciously. But eventually, we have to talk that out because it's there. We're carrying it. And if we don't talk about it, eventually it begins to wreak havoc on our nervous system, on all of the sensories. And what happens then is, for a leader, you begin to react instead of respond. And when a leader has to make decisions, if you're carrying some emotional trauma and you haven't talked to a counselor or a coach or someone who's skilled in being able to talk someone through this, then eventually you'll begin to be making irrational decisions, or not healthy decisions for yourself or for your company. Now, the reason I'm familiar with this, as Chad had mentioned earlier, is a story I have on September 11, 2001. And I was a firefighter at the time. I was stationed in a company in Brooklyn. And at the time, that morning, I was working, and we saw it on TV like a lot of other people. That first tower was hit. And our units in a part of Brooklyn where we were, we can make it into Manhattan a lot quicker than Manhattan companies who are trying to navigate traffic. So once that happened and we saw that the North Tower was hit, we thought it was like an accident like everyone else. So of course we responded, we were called to respond, and we were listening to our radios and what was happening at the scene. And we were approaching the tunnel, then it was the Battery Tunnel. And as we were approaching it, the chief I had been working with at the time decided to put on the regular radio to see if there's reporters on the scene, because the closer you got to the scene, your handy talkies were becoming garbled because there was so much traffic. And as we reached the tunnel, that's when the second plane hit. And when that hit, we heard the reporter shout, because he was interviewing somebody who was coming out of the scene. And he mentioned that the second tower has been hit. And of course, everyone, all units were told to report in. And so when we got on the scene, there was still debris falling from the plane, and it was surreal. And just 4 months before that, we had been trained for terrorist activity. And there were some from the UK and from Ireland who came in, and we went through some drills and learned a lot. So suddenly now, I'm going through these procedures, thinking through them, and what I can remember, because I'm realizing this isn't a drill. This is real, and it's happening right now. So I have to start going through procedures, operational procedures. What am I going to be facing on the scene? Is there going to be car bombs or is there another plane? We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. So you change your checklist. This is not a normal high-rise fire. This is different. So the your senses are alert and the stress is there. And so now you have a heightened sensibility to everything that's going on around you. So what happened is we went into the Marriott Hotel, which stood right at the foot of both towers. And we were inside, and there was a staging area there where we would get our assignments. And I was assigned to the 75th floor of the North Tower, which means we would have to walk into the lobby of the North Tower, take the elevator, which we would control, and we would only take it up to the sky lobby, then we'd have to walk up from there because you can't take the elevator to a fire floor.
So, John, I have a question for you, though.
Sure.
So you're assigned to the 75th floor of a building that is on fire.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of stress right now going through your body.
Yes.
Thoughts going through your body. What are you thinking at that moment? And then obviously I want to hear the rest of the story, but what are you thinking? Because I'm correlating it to what a lot of people are going through right now,
Right.
with the fear of, oh my God, I'm losing my business. Oh my God, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Can I pay my mortgages?
Exactly.
And like all of a sudden thoughts that are just running rampant in the mind. You're going up a building. You're going up a building that's on fire. Just got hit by an airliner. What's in your mind? What are you thinking?
Okay. This is where some people might be familiar with the law of magnification comes into play here. Like anyone, first responders, military, you're taught when you're doing your job to go through the procedures of that situation. And as the situation changes, then there's a different set of procedures that would apply to that situation. So obviously we shifted from high-rise fire to now it's terrorism, and so it's a totally different ball game. And there's other procedures. The reason I mentioned the law of magnification is because when it comes to thoughts, that the law of magnification states that whatever you think on the most becomes magnified in your life. Now, it doesn't make the thing any bigger itself, but it becomes bigger to you. And they don't want that happening. Because if you get sidetracked, especially for the military, you're actually in warfare.
Yeah.
The last thing you need is to be
Distracted.
So you can't magnify what's the enemy doing. You think through procedures. So in my case, as a firefighter, I'm thinking through my procedures, what I need to do, A, B, C, D. When I get on the fire floor, this is probably what I'm going to be looking at. I have A, B, C, D things to do. So you need to be at certain places at a certain time. And that's what makes this thing operate. And that was going through my mind that, oh man, we got to go up to the 75th floor. And then we're going to be supervising units with units. We don't know what we're going to see. And of course, I don't describe in detail what I had already seen getting on the scene and the things I saw after the collapses. But we just were getting our units together, quick game plan, A, B, C, D, this is what we do. And then we head up. Well, we only took about 2 or 3 steps after we got our assignments, and you started to hear this rumbling sound. And now the entire lobby begins to shake and bounce like an earthquake. Now, I was never in an earthquake of that magnitude. So the best way I could describe it was this was an earthquake. And it only took a few seconds where this thing got louder. It was all around us, and then all of a sudden everything came crashing down. And instantly everything was pitch black, deadly silence. I had landed on top of another chief, and there were firefighters all around us. And open your eyes, and you can't see your hand in front of your face, pitch black. We knew it was a collapse, but we had no idea this was the South Tower that landed on us. We thought it was the hotel that itself collapsed. And got up, flashlights go on, and you take account procedures. Because now it switches from fire to collapse. And you're involved in a collapse, so the first thing is you get up, you take account of who's there, how many civilians, how many personnel, and so on. So that's the first thing we did. And then we started to help some people out, rescue some people who were trapped. But as we looked around, we saw behind us, behind me, less than 36 inches, was just nothing but a wall of steel and concrete from floor to ceiling, just rubble. Our way was blocked to that corridor that would have went into the North Tower lobby. So now we were trapped, had to find a way out. So it took us about 15, maybe 20 minutes to find a way out and begin to take some of the injured people there, some civilians. We got to an opening. By now, it's about 20, 25 minutes or so. And chief of department was outside. and I was motioned to come to him, and so I was all right. So we get out to, it was like a window or something. We
Mm.
just crawled over, and I went out to him. He sends me north toward Vesey Street. He says they had to move the command center outside, a command post, because of the collapse. I don't know what collapsed. I don't know if this is the tower or
Mm.
this is the, I thought it was the hotel. So I start to walk away from him, and the other people are now helping everybody out of the building.
Yeah.
And unknowing to me that when I was speaking to the chief of department and he gives me my orders, that I'm 2 minutes away from standing in front of the North Tower as it's collapsing.
Mm.
I don't know that. So I walk toward Vesey Street. I'm directly across the street from the towers, and I look up. I'm not aware that the other tower's gone. And I don't realize that yet, but I'm looking at the North Tower, and I see that big aerial on the top starting to sway. And I knew the specs on that thing.
Mm.
It's approximately 300 feet. And I'm thinking, if that thing falls, that's like a 30-story javelin,
Mm.
falling in the city. And I'm thinking that would be catastrophic. As I'm thinking that, that tower lets go and starts coming down.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I had no doubt in my mind that those were my last few seconds on Earth.
Mm.
And a lot of people say, "Were you afraid?" No, not at that time, because it happens too fast and everything goes numb because there's too much to comprehend.
Yeah.
So I just turned around, took off, ran, uh, got across the other street, Vesey Street. There was a truck there, dove behind a truck because I know I'm not going to outrun this thing. And just as I dove behind it, this thing blew past like a hurricane. I mean, you could feel it. And there's all sorts of debris in it. And as the tower comes down, and you hear things crash, and the truck I was behind was actually moving.
Mm.
And then in a second, it was over. Pitch black, silence. And I don't know now, did I just get, buried again? And it's
Yeah.
just, I have no way of knowing this. Open my eyes, pitch black. Can't see a thing. You can't breathe.
Mm.
I couldn't use my mask because it was already filled with debris from the collapse. And now I try to breathe, and it's like somebody threw a handful of sawdust in my mouth. You couldn't
Mm.
breathe. That lasted about 4 or 5 minutes, pitch black, till finally that cloud lifts. They said it took about 4 minutes.
Mm.
For me, it seemed like it took forever, and so did it for others. And now you're dealing it. It's a surreal view. You don't realize everything's down, but everything's in grayscale. This haze is just hanging. There's no color.
Yeah.
And so I managed to make my way to an ambulance, and then came back and started searching. But the aspect of that, and the reason I bring this up is because of the post trauma,
Mm.
where I didn't realize internally the impact that had, because through the whole time, the thing that keeps you thinking straight is the procedures. And that's what keeps you from panic. If you panic, you're useless.
Mm.
So no matter what happens, if things shift, there's something for that. So that's what I kept thinking,
Mm.
procedures. And so now, after 9/11 and then the year that follows, this is where the things from the inside come
Yeah.
up.
Mm.
And this is why they offer help, counseling units, go to the firehouses and so on. And for me, for that year, the thing that helped me was because at that time there was a demand for first responders
Mm.
to come and speak. And I didn't realize this, but for 2 years, I traveled around the country, and I was just telling the story, and then the aftermath, and so on, and then fielding questions. And I spoke in universities, high schools,
Mm.
coliseum stadiums, all, in satellite hookups. So uh, I didn't realize it, but I was talking through my feelings and
Mm.
my emotions.
Yeah.
And when I was fielding questions, especially from the university students around the country, they were asking me how I felt. Did I feel guilt? Did I feel anger? So the reason it helped me, because I had to process that and really get in touch with, how do I feel about that?
And I think to that point, what people are going through right now with the coronavirus is there's a lot of these different feelings.
Yes.
I heard of restaurants that I know, and I know the owners that are closing.
Yeah.
They don't have business, or business. One client of ours who had to have all of their locations closed
Yeah.
because there was a government mandated closing
That's right.
on their industry. So there's a lot of these emotions that are happening because of this coronavirus.
Yes.
So I guess that kind of leads me to the next part, though, that a lot of the information that people are getting and receiving um, is really playing into this part over here, the emotional and psychological perspective,
That's
right?
right.
So it's one thing for us to deal with the situation, but it's another thing to have information that's being given to us that's heightening our emotional and psychological
Yes.
perspective, right? So I think one of the things that you and I said we wanted to do on here was to really give some people some valuable information, and there's a couple of graphs that you'll see, and this is an interesting one because this here, the source is the China Center for Disease Control and Prevention. But what's interesting is it's a little less than 45,000 confirmed cases in China, where this really began.
Right.
And you see that 80.9% of them are mild flu-like symptoms. A little less than 14 are severe and 4.7 are critical. I think I think sometimes people are a little concerned because they think it's more dangerous. Not saying that it's not a dangerous
Right.
virus, and
Yeah.
and with the asterisk here saying that we're not doctors,
That's right.
but we're looking at this leading through a crisis perspective. It is serious. It's something to definitely take seriously,
Right.
but the magnitude of how dangerous it is for an individual. Now, for a society, that's the reason why they're taking some drastic measures.
Yes. They
But
have to.
yeah, but for an individual, on an individual level, from a health perspective, I'm not saying from a financial perspective, 81% of the people that had it in China were very mild, nothing different than our traditional flu-like symptoms. This leads me to another part, which is really like these are the people that are most at risk. Because this is what I believe, John. I believe that people who are most informed make good decisions.
That's right.
And we've always said this with the leaders and the entrepreneurs that we work with. We say we don't sell them. We give them facts, and they make the decisions based on the facts.
That's
So
correct.
can you kind of share a little bit about this slide about the 60 plus, and those are ones that are at risk?
Yep. So obviously, when you're dealing with this, and they stress also underlying conditions, and as we get older, the tolerance to fight things off lessens, and your risk is higher. So on the graph in front of us, you're looking at those who are 60 to 69. You're looking at 3.6%. And if you're looking at this is you're dealing with lung capacity. You're dealing with pre-existing conditions, but also take in mind some people are smokers too, and that has an impact. But the coronavirus directly impacts lung capacity. So when it comes to that, and you're looking at this, who is more susceptible? And on the graph, as you get older, you become more susceptible, and that's where the danger is. But the infectees, it's such a very, very low percentage of those to the left of the scale. The younger you are, a higher rate of recovery, but the older you are, there could be a lesser rate of recovery as the age goes up because we don't have the resiliency we had when we were younger. And this is important because now you got family members, now you have leaders of companies who are older, and so on. And this is where it's a reality check for our mortality. We don't realize how fragile life is until we're faced with something like this,
Mm.
and we realize that, even myself, just being over 60, but I'm in very good health, and I'm constantly exercising and stuff. So it's very important to realize, A, to have a positive frame of mind, B, take proper precautions, and to take care of your health.
Just to that point, studies have shown this, that people who are in a more positive state of mind
Mhm.
have healthier immune systems.
That's a
So,
fact.
so, so it's a fact, and one of the things that we would say as you're going through this is
Yep.
the emotional and psychological perspective.
Yeah.
If our thoughts turn to beliefs and our beliefs turn to behaviors and our behaviors turn to results,
Right.
then let's manage our thought life so that we have a higher probability of our immune system being better.
That's right. You're exactly right.
So, that kind of leads me to the other part, and we're just going to go through these slides pretty quickly. But of these people of these 45,000 or so people in mainland China, this is as of, by the way, March 16th of 2020, 10.5% was cardiovascular, They had that the existing condition. 7.3 was diabetes, and you can see it on the graph there. So part of it is just understanding, putting ourselves in a situation that can protect ourselves, and not make ourselves vulnerable, recognizing that if we have one of those, then we really need to be extra sensitive and extra cautious from a health perspective. But this is the key, and this is something that I really wanted to share with you. This is my perspective of it. So I'm not saying that this is 100% fact, but I will say that when I spent the time to really analyze what was going on, because there was a sense of fear for a moment until I really took in all of the data and looked at it. And when you look at some of the precautionary measures that the federal government's taking, obviously some of the state governments are taking, you recognize that what they're trying to do is they're trying to flatten the curve, this curve here, so that we don't get to this point, because that line right here is where the capacity for our healthcare system in the United States, and that being the case, that by quarantining and really not having people be around each other and doing this thing now known as social distancing, it helps flatten the curve and keep that curve below our healthcare system capacity. So I say this to say is that I'm personally not concerned that we're going to see this crazy outbreak, because I think we're taking preventative measures to protect against that. But I think that's the reason why, in my perspective, why the government and some of the local agencies are taking the measures that they are. That does not mean, though, that it's not impacting our life, and it doesn't mean that it's not impacting our businesses and our finances. It is. However, understanding that the fear that many people are under because of some of this self quarantining and also this social distancing is really to protect us from getting something that is so much further dangerous down the road. I like saying it like this: the way that they're doing it right now is a bad month compared to potentially a bad life or a bad year or two. So I'm hoping and believing that what I just shared is accurate. It's my perspective on it, but it's also how we look at things changes what we look at.
Yes.
So the last thing in wrapping before we jump is the HIV, SARS, MERS, Ebola were mentioned 69 million times or less. The coronavirus has been mentioned in the media 2.1 billion times. Of course, we're going to have a lot more fear. Of course, we're going to have a lot more anxiety if we're not managing it. That's why I said from the very beginning, it's so important to manage our thought life. Not saying not to look into it, not saying to not have accurate data. I'm just saying that if we don't manage our thought life, someone else will.
Yes.
So we're going to jump into the next part of it, um, the emotional and psychological perspective, and we're just going to talk about, just for a couple of minutes, just going to talk about these 4 points, and John's going to share a little bit more about the this aspect of it.
So prolonged stress, which reduces ability to make effective decisions, and we're going to take them probably all together, discussion around this. And what I want to first address is the difference between stress and anxiety. And a lot of people don't understand that stress is not a problem. Stress comes to all of us. Life can be stressful. So stress is not the problem. It's the response to stress that is the problem. And so you hear the term stress response, and that's the more accurate way of saying it. So stress in and of itself isn't the problem, it's how we respond to it. And simply, as I mentioned before, that stress alerts us, it heightens our awareness. Now, we either respond to stress proactively or reactively. If you respond to stress proactively, it's healthy. And that means you have a plan. You get ahead of the curve, and this is what we're going to do A, B, C, D. And if you respond reactively, that can be an unhealthy way to respond to stress, because the fact that anxiety causes us to react. So the problem here is that stress eventually fades away. It comes and goes throughout our life, but anxiety does not fade away. In fact, anxiety, if not addressed, prolonged anxiety begins to become a disorder.
Yeah. So, John, would you say for those that are listening that are dealing with some form of stress, that are dealing with some form of anxiety, that talking through it, maybe having a conversation. So, if you're a business leader, maybe bringing a few other business leaders around a table or a virtual table and having a conversation around what they're doing, how they're handling some of the stress, how they're handling the things. You think that makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense. That's the first order of business. Talk it out. You have to talk through your emotions.
Mm,
And after talking to coworkers, who've experienced the same thing, if you still have that, then obviously it's a health professional you need to see because they're trained to talk people through it. But you can't bottle it up. And here's the reason. If you bottle it up, you get to this thing of being in a traumatic event, and everybody's familiar with
yeah.
the term
Hmm.
post-trauma stress.
Hmm.
So if we don't talk through our emotions, we just bottle it up. We don't want to talk about it and think it's going to go away. It's not going to go away
Mm,
because it builds anxiety, and anxiety doesn't fade away.
mm,
Anxiety can eat us, from the inside out. The issue then is you become to have what's known as post-trauma stress syndrome,
yeah.
and that's the first stages, and that's already a problem. So with this can happen with a catastrophic event, and of course this would qualify the coronavirus, but it's for other things, not only just the coronavirus, but for
Mm,
people in their lives who've gone through hard lives, they've sensed smaller traumas but consistently throughout their life. And they don't
mm.
realize you end up with post-trauma the same way.
That's almost like the phrase when people say the straw that cracked the camel's back.
Broke the camel's back. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's what it is. Sooner or later, something's got to give.
Mm,
We're complex beings, but we're not robots. We're not indestructible. Where there's a breakdown emotionally,
yeah.
and that's how we intake things. So, really quickly, some of the symptoms of post-traumatic syndrome is, of course, having this heightened sense of feeling. You could have survivor's guilt if you're in something like 9/11, which I did, and I battled through it. I had to battle this for my wife and I both for almost a year,
Yeah.
for the better part of the year, and I had a lot of the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. The only thing that kept me from having that full-blown disorder was traveling around discussing it.
Mm.
So I had to talk
It
my
was
feelings
it was
out.
almost like therapy for you to be able to just share your story and
That's
not have
right.
to hold it in.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
answer the questions, how I felt about it.
Hmm.
So these are some of the symptoms of the disorder, and that is the reoccurring dreams, nightmares, negative thoughts. If you hear something, smell something, or feel something that triggers the memory, instantly, emotionally transported back to
Well,
that situation.
I think to that point right now is so important because not too long ago it was 2008. And from a financial perspective, I mean, the coronavirus has obviously impacted the whole economics of this world,
Yes.
the financial markets, right? And from a financial markets perspective, we saw it, the largest drop in market history since 1987.
Right.
So you're seeing a 3,000 point drop.
Yeah.
Um, that may bring people back to what occurred in 2008. And I say this in 2008, Danielle and I had a bad business decision that we made. And in 2008, I didn't have the wisdom that I have today. So in 2008, when that occurred, I was panicking, fear, anxiety, right? In 2020, as we're going through this and we've gained all this wisdom and life experience and lessons and successes and failures, you realize that I cannot go back to that. The
That's
only
right.
way the only way I go back to that is if I allow my emotions to take over. Because right now, one is we're not in that spot that we were in.
Right.
The only way that I can get myself in that spot is if I allow myself to have continued fear, doubt, and worry.
Right. And that's again, we're going into thoughts.
And that starts with your thought life.
Yeah.
That's why thoughts, beliefs, behaviors,
Yeah.
results.
Yeah. So now here's some of the good news in statistics. As far as post-trauma is concerned, that statistically, approximately 50% recover from it, fully recover.
Mm,
And that's a good thing, half of them. So the other half, that means where they have to keep going through, therapy, talking with someone, and sometimes medication will help
yeah.
keep things down, and eventually they will recover. But the starting point is 50% or better. Secondly, when it comes to post-trauma disorder, Overall, approximately 3.5% of the entire population in America at one time or another are affected in any given year by
Mm,
some sort of trauma.
yeah.
So it's not a rare thing.
So I think what I'm hearing as we're kind of going through these stats is that in times such as this, it's normal to feel like that.
That's right.
What is abnormal, if I'm hearing you correctly, is not talking through it and not dealing with the emotions, because whether fear, anxiety, worry, stress, if we don't talk about it, it's going to get worse. So one of the recommendations I think I'm hearing to people that are listening on this is really talk through it.
You have to talk
Talk
through it.
through it. Find other business leaders. Find other leaders. Find other families, other parents that are going through similar stuff with this whole coronavirus, and just talk through it. How are you dealing with it? How is your family dealing through it with the kids being home? How is your business dealing with not being able to have people come to the store right now for a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the case may be? Talk through it.
Yeah, it's important, especially as leaders. Listen, there's no shame in this. As leaders, the statistic here shows that at any given year, nearly 8 million people in our country have some form of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
So it's not a foreign thing. So to your point, you can't just say, I'll tough it out. You can't do that. You need to talk it out. And I would say if you're carrying it for a while, you need to talk to, someone in the health field, and talk to a psychologist. Nothing wrong with that because they're trained to do this. And here are some of the facts behind this. 70% of adults experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So this is nothing strange. This is normal. 20% experiencing traumatic events will develop the full disorder. It's 20%. That means 80% recover.
Yeah.
20% need help because
Mm.
they'll develop the disorder and the help will get them through.
Yeah.
And finally, 1 in 13 will develop some degree of post-traumatic stress at some point in their life.
Mm. Yeah. That's powerful. As we're going through this, so we're now leading to the second part of it, which is, all right, the emotional and the psychological perspective. We got to get that in order, because if we don't get our thought life in order, if we don't handle our emotions and psychologically correct, there's no way that we effectively lead. There's no way that we have great business strategy to take our businesses to the next level,
That's
to
right.
take our organizations to the next level. How about to take our families to that next level? But that's going to lead us to the second part now, which is effective leadership. And leadership is the behavior. So we said thoughts, beliefs, behaviors. Behaviors are based on our thought life. So if we got our thought life and our beliefs right around our emotional and psychological perspective, well, now we can lead more effectively. And that kind of leads John and I into the next part, which is really these 5 areas are so important through crisis to lead well. So we're going to jump into it. We're going to share these 5. We're going to spend maybe 5 or 6 minutes on these, and then we're going to jump into the next part. But I'm hoping that one or two of the things that we're sharing is really going to something that you can grow, hold on to, grab onto, and use as you go through what we're going through as a nation and globally.
Yep. Well, first, rapid response is crucial. In any crisis, the quicker the response, the better off, because you want to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
And as a leader, in your company, the rapid response is first, you talk to your people.
Yeah.
You got to communicate with your people. How are they doing? How are they feeling? How are they impacted by this? You
Yeah.
have to know that. And that's the only way you're going to know that is rapid response. First things first.
Yeah.
You take care of yourself, take care of your people. And if that happens, then you start getting ahead of that curve where then you can better take care of your clients or your customers, or else the business is going to be embroiled in turmoil, confusion.
Mm.
And let's face it, we know that hurt people. Well, hurting companies, that's what's going to happen.
Yep. Yep. And I'll say this, John, to the rapid response part, is that if you're a business leader, your clients and your team members are going through some emotional issues. Is there a better time to right now be there for them? Is there a better time to not think of self, but to think of them and to invest in them? That's one of the things that we're doing right now, just with this virtual discussion. We had the ability to say We could focus on trying to grow our business and get through it, or we can focus on helping other people get through it. I think a rapid response is so important,
Yes.
and a response that's not only self-focused, but it's others focused.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're settling your people, your team. The second part of that with a rapid response is control your emotions. You don't want to have a rapid response and you come across excitable and you don't want to do that. What you want to do is just control your thoughts and your feelings, identify them, know what it is, know why. And before you go to your team, before you go to your people, make sure you could articulate yourself what you're feeling. And transparency here is a win. Because if you sit down with your team, you'll be amazed. If you're feeling something, 9 times out of 10, your team's feeling the same thing.
Yeah.
So then that means now sit down and really hear your people out. And you control your emotions, but let them know you feel the same thing. And I'm telling you, that bonds people together. And
Yeah.
I've watched companies come out of incredible situations that, lesser companies were just folded. And what they did is they bonded around it. And some companies actually had health officials come in and talk to their team
Yeah.
and talk them through it. So really, the two things: rapid response, really important. Get ahead of the curve. Secondly, connect with your people at a deeper level and make sure they're okay. The health of your company is everything.
Yeah. And we say this all the time that when conflict, crisis, or the coronavirus enters, naturally your body goes into this fight or flight mode.
Yes.
And when that happens, your body releases a chemical, and that chemical is known as epinephrine. It gets released into your bloodstream, and it makes it very hard for you to be able to hear what other people are saying. It makes it very hard for you to make rational decisions. So part of controlling your emotions is allowing yourself to not get emotionally wrapped up, so much so that you're not being able to be there effectively for everyone else. And I'll share this with you, one quick thing, a quick exercise that you can do to help you with this is close your eyes for 60 seconds, breathe in, breathe out, and do that for 60 seconds. And you'll see that your body gets more relaxed and you'll be able to make some better decisions. Thirdly, communicate clearly, because effective leadership requires very clear and effective communication. In times of crisis, communication is so key. And I just want to encourage you to really work on communicating. Communicate with your clients, communicate with your team members. Tell them you care about them. Tell them that they matter. Let them know that we're going to get through this. Next is assemble your influences. It's so key to assemble your influences, because there's a book called Tipping Point, and it really spoke about where 10% of the team influences the other 90.
It's true.
Now, if you have the right 10% of the team, you give yourself the highest level for success. If on your team right now you have people that are panicking, that have fear driven, that they're terrified, they're worried about everything, and they're leading your people, you're going to have more of that. So assemble your influencers. You have to help them get a hold of their emotions, get a hold of communicating effectively, because if not, that becomes the same way that this virus is growing. That feeling, that negative energy, negative emotions can take over your company, can take over your family, can take over everything. So you want to be careful of that, but assemble your influences, get them on the same page, unite as a team, and watch what happens.
Yeah. To your point, Chad, you getting your influences on board first and addressing your feelings with them so you're on the same page. Your influences will have more of an impact in 1 week among your people than you have yourself in a month and a half or 2 months.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
so
true.
important. Get those influences on board.
Yep. So, lastly is implement your business strategy. If you're a business leader or you run a division at a company, implement your business strategy. It doesn't mean that you don't adapt. I'm not saying that. Adaptation is so key, especially now. But implement your business strategy. When you come up with an idea of how you're going to move forward, don't be distracted by everything that's going on, because that lowers your chances of effectively leading and getting through this. Implement your business strategy. It's so important. Which then leads me to the last part, your business strategy. What are some of the things that you can do from a business strategy perspective to get through this? And one of them, I'm going to say is, and this is key. Anyone who knows me personally, they know that one of the things that is most important to me is consistency. And right now, consistency gives the ability for people to say, I could trust my leader. Things are crazy, but my leader, he's confident or she's confident. So what I would say is be very, very conscious that you're still being consistent in the things that you were doing that was working and that can still work as you move forward. The next part is choosing an abundance mindset or choose abundance consciousness. This is so important because everything in life is based off of a choice. We choose to have success. We also choose to have failure. And that sounds crazy. You say, why do I choose to have failure? Because there were things that you could have done that could have made you win. But you chose not to. You chose to sleep in that day, or you chose to not read the books that you should have read, or you chose not to find mentors who could help develop you and grow you. That's a choice. But so is a mindset. And what I want to share with you right now is something that John Maxwell, who's a friend, mentor of Danielle and mine, he shared with us maybe 4 months ago. He said, I choose abundance. He goes, I don't operate in scarcity, I operate in abundance. What that means is look for the opportunities. Right now, there are so many opportunities that are out there. You just got to look for them. The opportunities look different than what they did last month. Last month, the opportunities were very clear. But this is how people who lead through crisis actually grow through crisis, because they recognize opportunities that other people just can't see. So the question becomes is, what are the opportunities right now that are in your life that gives you the ability to win, to lead through this? Choose an abundance mindset. Thirdly, is look for opportunities to focus on. What I'd encourage you to do is take a piece of paper, split it up into three. Literally take the paper and put it into three sections, three equal sections. On the first section, on the top of it, write short term, which is less than 90 days. In the middle, midterm, 91 days to a year. And then long term, a year plus. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write down the opportunities that are around and right now possible in those short, mid, and long term chart. And what'll happen is as you start working on your short term, those short term may turn into your midterm. But the clearer you are to look for those opportunities. Like one of the things that we're doing at Lions Pride is we're committed to making an impact in more people's lives. Instead of sitting around saying, okay, well, right now people can't meet together, our clients can't get together. No, we're gonna do what we're doing right now. We're gonna invest in people. We're gonna develop people. We're gonna share our wisdom, our knowledge. We're gonna help encourage people. We're gonna tell them that it's possible to get through this. And not only is it possible, but we believe in you and we want to invest in you. Choose abundance mindset. Look for opportunities. And lastly, well, not lastly, but one of the second to last things is focus on successful actions. There were certain things that had gotten you to your success where you are today. Don't just abandon it because right now everything is going crazy. Focus on the successful actions. See the successful actions that will continue to serve you. And look at your successful actions as the foundation of your home. If you pull that foundation of your home away, that home collapses. So don't abandon the successful actions. Look at all the actions that you're doing and saying which ones right now are most needed and a necessity, and which ones are not serving me anymore. And the ones that are not serving you, let them go. And now establish new actions. Like one of the things that we're doing is we launching now a virtual mastermind. Before the coronavirus, we had Lions Club masterminds. Now we're creating a virtual mastermind that's going to be a national, global mastermind that people can join no matter where they are in the world. Well, that didn't exist until the coronavirus. You see, what happened was we were focusing on successful actions and we recognized where an opportunity lied, where people are excited now to jump on a virtual mastermind. And then lastly, plan ahead. This is a game plan, a strategy that you can use to get ahead. And we're going to go through, I'm going to go through it with you because it's important. And I think that you'll be able to apply this specifically to what you're doing over at your company, what you're doing in your division. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to now talk about what the plan ahead is and where we got it from. We learned this from John Maxwell. He's one of the top leadership coaches in the world, and he created the acronym. It's first predetermine your objectives. That's the P. Determine what you want to do over the next 90 days, 12 months. Lay out your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? You see, the better we are at identifying what we want, the better we can recognize it when it walks by us. That's so important. Adjust your priorities. What was a priority last month is not a priority this month. There are certain things that I had to do, and John and my wife, who's one of our business partners, we had to do change around things that we were doing because it wasn't going to help us get to where we needed to go based off of the environment that we're in today. Notify key personnel. If you don't get the key people in your life on board, all you're going to do is deal with resistance. Notify them. Let them know this is what's going on. The next 90 days it's going to be intense, but don't worry, we're going to get through this and then I'll come back to normality. I'll have my hours back that I used to have. Allow time for acceptance. One of the things that we're doing tonight, actually, after this recording, is we're bringing our team together and we're going to be sharing a little bit about our vision, a little bit about our game plan, how we're going to navigate these next 12 months, the next 90 days. But we need to allow our team to have time for acceptance because I've thought through this stuff. John has, Danielle has, but some of them, this may be the first time they're hearing it. We got to allow them to think through this. Head into action. We need a checklist of what exactly needs to be done. Expect problems. I mean, we're going through a major problem right now, but expect problems. Expect that this is not going to be easy, but anything that's easy is usually not worthwhile, and anything that's worthwhile is usually never easy. Expect problems. Always point to successes. One of the things that I'm notorious for is I say all the time, I say fan the flame. What that means is that if you've ever been at a fire pit or a fire, if you get underneath the fire and you fan it, the oxygen brings when you bring more oxygen to the fire gets bigger. Well, right now we need our team to be on fire. We need our families to be on fire, meaning they're on board, they're excited. Fan the flame. Find ways that they're winning, that they're doing something well, and fan the flame. Find little successes because momentum begets more momentum. So when we get momentum and then we fan the flame, we get more momentum. And then lastly, the D stands for daily review your progress. If you're going to get through this the right way, you can't have a month go without you looking at your progress. You need to be looking at your progress daily. The better you look at your progress, you'll recognize if that day didn't get you closer to where you need to go. But right now, these are times that you need to plan ahead. I'm encouraging you do the best that you can to follow through on that plan ahead program. I just let you know. And then in wrapping, these are words to live by. These are things that we believe. These are things I think can impact your life. As you go through this coronavirus and the season and the world that we live in right now, focus on others. Focus on your relationships. Invest in the people that matter to you. Invest in your family. Invest in your clients. Invest in your team. Focus on creating value. Focus on areas that you could give more value than you take. Focus on opportunities. There's such negative emotions out there right now. It's so easy to be sucked into the vortex of negativity. Focus on opportunity. Focus on progress, not perfection. Right now, we need progress. We need to move the ball forward. This one is so key. Focus on today. Today is all that we have the ability to impact. All the worry that we have for tomorrow means nothing because tomorrow doesn't exist. Yesterday didn't matter because yesterday we don't have the ability to impact. We can learn from it, but we definitely can't impact it. Today gives us the ability to impact. So focus on today. Make every day your masterpiece, as John Maxwell says. Focus on who you can be. That means you're going to have to change a little. An environment and society right now, like we're going through, you can't just be the same person you were yesterday. It's not going to work. I mean, you can stay there, but it doesn't mean you're going to get through this effectively. Focus on your responses. You know, you don't, just because something happened doesn't mean you got to respond to it negatively. Look for the opportunity. Focus on what's available rather than what you don't have. And then the last one is focus on gratitude. Gratitude is such a game changer because it allows you to be grateful for what you have rather than what you don't have. You see, years ago, I used to be so ungrateful. I was always focused on what I didn't have, and I shifted my mindset. Remember, thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, results? And I became grateful for what I had, and all of a sudden, I started getting more of it. So if you're grateful for your family, you're gonna have a better family life. If you're grateful for your business, your business is gonna get better. If you're grateful for your finances that you do have, you're gonna increase it. And you know, in wrapping, my partner John is gonna share some of the things that gratitude has, some of the attributes that people that have gratitude have. John, you want to share on that as we wrap up?
Sure. This is from Amy Morin, who's a psychotherapist, and she writes 7 scientifically proven benefits of gratitude. And just being thankful is everything. And here are the 7. These are the things it's been scientifically proven. First, that gratitude opens the door to more relationships. Being a thankful person makes you a better person to be around. Secondly, gratitude improves physical health. So you're not agonizing over failures or whatever, rather than focusing on that. Remember, thoughts? Focus on the things you have and that you're grateful for. Third, that gratitude improves psychological health. So you're not always under so much stress or anxiety because you're focusing more on the things you do have and that you're grateful for. Gratitude, fourth, enhances empathy and reduces aggression. And that's huge in relationships. You become more relatable to people. 5, gratitude helps people sleep better. It's been proven. You'll get a good night's sleep. 6, gratitude improves a person's self-esteem. And that's huge because how you feel about yourself is basically how you're going to view others and treat them. So we have to be well adjusted personally. If I like myself, chances are I'm going to like you. You know, we may not be best friends, but hey, we can work together. So it's very important. So show gratitude. And finally, the 7th one, gratitude increases mental energy. Why? Because anxiety saps mental energy.
Mm, yeah.
So 7 things by Amy Moore.
Yeah, so in wrapping, we're encouraged. We hope that this was a blessing to you. We want to encourage you to continue focusing on those 3 areas: the emotional and psychological perspective, your effective leadership and business strategy. Share this with others. This is not easy times, but these times show us who we are. And just in wrapping, you know, John Maxwell said this. He said, "Great leadership stands out in times of crisis, because great leaders have prepared themselves for the moment. Their voice is one that responds, not reacts." I hope that today was powerful for you, gave you a little jolt of energy, gave you some faith, and respond. Don't react. Lead through this crisis. God bless you. It was great spending time with you. Bye bye.